The sun burned hot over Kaduna. The air was heavy, thick, and still. Inside a small house, little Ayatun stood frozen, just 5 years old, too scared to cry. His eyes were wide, his small fists clenched, as he watched something no child ever should. His father, Chief Boma, once respected, now feared, was shouting, drunk, angry. He grabbed Ayatun's mother, Ifyananya, by the hair and dragged her across the dusty floor. She screamed, but no one came. Neighbors shut their windows, pretending not to hear. Chief Boma's fists landed again and again, louder than the silence outside. Blood splashed onto her white wrapper, turning it red. Ayatun didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched, his heart pounding, his tiny body shaking. His mother fell to the ground, not moving. The noise stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of the fan spinning overhead, creaking slowly. Chief Boma lit a cigarette like nothing had happened. Ayatun stood there, the image burned into his memory forever. No one knocked. No one helped. It was just another day. But deep inside that quiet boy, something was growing, something hard, something strong. A fire that started that day, in that room, with blood on the floor and silence in the walls. It was past midnight. The world outside was quiet, but inside the small house, fear still lived in every corner. Ifyananya lay on the floor, bruised, weak, and bleeding. Her body hurt, but her heart hurt even more. She looked at her son, Ayatun, sleeping on a mat in the corner, curled up like a scared animal. His little face was stained with dried tears. That night, something in her broke, and something else came alive. Slowly, painfully, she stood up. Her legs shook. Her face was swollen. Her wrapper was torn. But her mind was clear, they had to leave. Now. She woke Ayatun gently. Shoo, she whispered. We're going on a journey. He didn't ask where. He trusted her. She picked him up, even though her ribs screamed in pain, and quietly opened the door. The night air was cold against their skin. Her feet were bare. Blood still dripped from a cut on her leg. But she didn't stop. She walked fast, holding Ayatun close. Street dogs barked. The moon lit their way. They didn't know where they were going. They just knew they had to go far, far from Chief Boma, far from the screams, far from the fists and silence. After what felt like forever, they found an old train yard. Rusted metal, broken glass, long-forgotten coaches. It was empty, dark, and cold, but it was safe. Ifyananya crawled into one of the abandoned train cars with Ayatun in her arms. They lay on the floor, nothing but an old sack between them and the cold steel. Ayatun didn't cry. He just held on to his mother, tightly. She stroked his hair and whispered, "You'll never grow up like him. I promise you." Her voice was soft but full of fire. "You'll never be afraid again." In that broken train yard, under the stars, a new life quietly began. It wasn't easy. There was no bed, no food, no light. But there was peace. For the first time in years, there were no screams, no footsteps of a drunk man coming closer. Just the sound of crickets, and a mother holding her son like her life depended on it, because it did. For days, they stayed hidden. Ifyananya cleaned her wounds with rainwater. She gave Ayatun small bites of dry bread she had hidden in her wrapper. Slowly, her body healed. Her spirit grew stronger. People passed by the train yard every day, but no one noticed the woman and child hiding in the shadows. And that was good. She didn't want to be seen. Not yet. One morning, the sun rose bright and orange. Ifyananya stood outside the train car, barefoot in the dirt, looking out at the world. She took a deep breath. She had nothing, no money, no home, no family, but she had her son. And she had her promise. That was enough. Holding Ayatun's hand, she whispered again, "No fear. Not anymore." Then she began to walk, slowly, into the unknown. Not as a victim, but as a mother ready to build a new world, one step at a time. Years passed like pages turning in an old book. Life was never easy, but Ayatun and his mother never stopped moving forward. They had found a small one-room shack in the crowded slums of Port Harcourt, where the noise of the city never slept. The air smelled of sweat, smoke, and survival. Ayatun, once a small boy with wide, scared eyes, had changed. He was taller now, stronger, but quiet. He rarely smiled. He spoke only when needed. Pain had shaped him, not just from his past, but from every hungry night, every long walk to school, and every punch he took at the boxing gym. Boxing had found him by accident, or maybe fate. One day, he saw boys training under a bridge, throwing punches into the air, their feet dancing on dusty ground. He stood and watched for hours. The coach, a tired man with hard eyes, noticed. "You want to fight?" he asked. Ayatun nodded. That was the day everything changed. From that moment, his fists became his voice. He trained like a soldier, hitting the bag until his knuckles bled. He didn't fight for fun. He fought for food, for respect, for a future. Ifeananya worked every single day under the hot sun, frying yam on the roadside. Her fingers were always burnt from hot oil. Her clothes always smelled of smoke. But she never complained. Every naira she earned went into Ayatun's school fees and training shoes. Sometimes they ate only once a day. Sometimes not at all. But she always told him, better to be hungry today than broken tomorrow. He never forgot those words. Ayatun never talked about his father. People around them didn't ask. They just saw a boy who never backed down, never cried, and never smiled. He became known in the slums as the Quiet Storm. At school, he sat at the back of the class, silent but sharp. After school, he went straight to the gym. If he wasn't punching something, he was running. Through the narrow, muddy streets, past shouting market women and Okada riders speeding by. He didn't party. He didn't play. His whole world was built on one dream: to be better, to be free. Ifeananya watched him every night when he came home soaked in sweat and bruises. She would heat water for him, rub his sore muscles, and whisper prayers over him while he slept. She didn't say it often, but her heart swelled with pride. Her boy was growing into a man, not like his father, never like him, but into someone made of steel and purpose. Life was still hard, but now, they were stronger than their past. They had no riches, but they had each other. In the heart of the slums, surrounded by struggle and noise, a silent storm was rising. Ayatun wasn't just fighting opponents in the ring, he was fighting every memory, every scar, every voice that said he couldn't make it. And every time his fists hit the bag, he hit back at the pain, the fear, the name, Boma. He was no longer the boy who watched in silence. He was becoming a man ready to change everything. Ayatun's name started small, whispered in local gyms, written on walls in chalk, spoken by boys who dreamed of being strong. But his fists spoke louder than words. Fight after fight, he won. He didn't smile when his hand was raised. He just nodded, eyes cold, jaw tight. People started to notice. Coaches, promoters, even strangers on the street would say, "That boy fights like he's carrying the weight of the world." And he was. Every punch was from years of pain. Every win was for his mother. Soon, he was no longer just a boy from the slums. He became a name, a force, a story. They called him the Iron Son of Nigeria. Not just because of his strength, but because nothing broke him. Not pain, not poverty, not fear. He was like iron, forged in fire, shaped by struggle. TV stations began to talk about him. Clips of his knockouts went viral. Newspapers printed his face with headlines like, "From the streets to the ring." Young boys in Port Harcourt started shadowboxing in the streets, pretending to be him. For the first time, Ayatun's name reached beyond the slums. And when he walked through his neighborhood, people clapped, women prayed for him, and men nodded with respect. Then, the big news came. A championship fight. In Abuja. The capital. National TV. Lights, cameras, crowds. The biggest stage of his life. Ifeananya cried when she heard. Not out of fear, but pride. Her son, the same boy she once carried through the night, barefoot and bleeding, was now about to fight in front of the entire nation. She packed his lucky towel, cooked his favorite meal, and hugged him tighter than ever. The journey to Abuja felt like a dream. Ayatun had never seen buildings so tall or lights so bright. He stayed focused. No distractions. No smiles. Just training, quiet and sharp. Reporters asked questions. He answered with few words. When they asked who his biggest opponent was, he paused and simply said, "He's from my past." That one line went viral. People online started guessing, was it an old rival? A criminal? Nobody knew. But Ayatun knew exactly who he meant. Posters of the fight were everywhere. Ayatun, the Iron Son vs. the nation's champion. Tickets sold out. The whole country waited. From Lagos to Kano, from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri, everyone was talking about the boy with fire in his eyes and silence on his lips. On the day of the fight, millions tuned in. Barbershops turned on TVs, streets went quiet. Even school kids begged to watch. Inside the locker room, Ayatun wrapped his hands slowly. His mother stood beside him, holding his towel. She looked at him, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "No fear, remember." He nodded. He didn't need to speak. The bell would do the talking. That night wasn't just about boxing. It was about everything he had survived. Everything he was about to finish. And as he walked into the ring, lights flashing, the crowd shouting his name, he knew, this was more than a fight. This was destiny. Chief Boma was no longer the man people once feared or respected. The title, Chief, still hung around his name like an old, dirty coat, but it meant nothing now. He had lost his power, lost his seat, lost everything, except his loud voice and his thirst for alcohol. Most nights, he sat at the same wooden bar, half drunk before the sun even went down. His clothes were wrinkled, his belly bigger, and his eyes dull from too many bottles. But his mouth never stopped. He talked like he was still important, like people still listened. In truth, most people ignored him. But tonight, the bar was full. A big fight was coming. The whole country was talking about Ayatun, the Iron Son of Nigeria. Boma leaned on the counter, waving his glass, slurring his words. "That boy, you see that boxer on the posters," he said, pointing to the TV screen in the corner. "That's my blood. My son." Some people turned their heads. Others rolled their eyes. "Yes, oh. I made him strong. Tough. He gets it from me," Boma laughed, his mouth full of stale beer. "You think he just woke up and became iron? No. I beat the softness out of him. From young." He slapped the table hard, laughing like he was telling a funny story. "I remember once, his mother tried to talk back. I showed her pepper. That woman, always crying, always weak. I told her, one day the boy would thank me." The men around him shifted uncomfortably. Some laughed, trying to keep the mood light. But most stayed quiet. They knew the story. Everyone in town had heard whispers. About how Ifeanyi left in the night. About how Boma drank more than he worked. About how his son never spoke his name. But Boma didn't care. The fame of Ayatun gave him something to hold on to, like a badge he didn't earn. In his mind, the bruises he gave were part of the boy's success, not scars of shame, but lessons. He talked like a soldier remembering war stories, bragging about beatings like they were medals. "You see how he punches?" Boma continued, louder now. "That's mine. That's my strength. I built that boy with my own hands." He raised his glass again, and the bartender shook his head. "Last one," he warned. But Boma didn't listen. He was too busy living in the past, too drunk on the idea that somehow, the son he broke would still carry his name like a crown. But deep down, under all the noise, there was something else, fear. He had seen the clips. He had heard Ayatun's words in interviews. "My biggest opponent is from my past." That line echoed in his head. It haunted him. But Boma pushed it away with every gulp of beer, every fake laugh. "He'll come to me," he said, grinning. "When he wins, he'll come and kneel before me. You'll see." But the truth was, Ayatun wasn't coming for hugs or thanks. He was coming with fists full of history. And Boma, lost in his bottle and broken pride, had no idea what was really waiting for him. The night of the championship fight was electric. The stadium in Abuja was packed, lights flashing, cameras everywhere. The crowd chanted Ayatun's name like a war cry. "Iron Son! Iron Son!" The whole country was watching. People in bars, homes, shops, and even buses had their eyes on the screen. Ayatun stood in the middle of the ring, sweat glistening on his skin, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He had just knocked out his opponent in the second round, clean, fast, brutal. The crowd erupted. Reporters rushed in, microphones pointed at him. But Ayatun didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He took the mic, and with a quiet voice that somehow cut through the noise, he said, "This victory isn't the real fight. My real opponent is from my past. Someone who taught me pain before I learned how to speak. And now, I'm calling him out. Let's settle it. One more fight, for everything he did." The stadium went silent for a second. Then the internet exploded. Who was he talking about? A childhood bully? A gang leader? A ghost from his past? No one knew. Except one man. Chief Boma. In a dark bar, far from the bright lights, Boma's eyes lit up as he saw the clip. He smiled wide, drunk and proud. "He's talking about me," he shouted, pounding the table. "That's my boy." The bartender looked at him with pity, but Boma didn't care. His heart raced. This was his moment. The spotlight was back. He saw it as a chance to be seen again, to be remembered, to steal part of his son's fame. "Set it up," he yelled to the TV. "I accept. He wants a fight. I'll give him a show." In his twisted mind, this wasn't about pain or apology. It was about glory. About reminding the world that he, Chief Boma, was the father of the Iron Sun. He called reporters the next day, told them he was ready. "Let the boy come," he laughed. "It's just a friendly match. A stunt. We'll give the people drama." He showed off old photos of Ayatund as a baby, told stories no one believed, and puffed his chest like a champion. What he didn't see was the truth behind his son's eyes. Ayatund wasn't doing this for fame. He wasn't playing. Ayatund trained harder than ever. Not just for a match, but for justice. For every night he heard his mother cry. For every time he stood frozen in fear. For every scar that never healed. This fight wasn't about belts or titles. It was about truth. His fists were no longer just weapons, they were memories, sharpened by silence. The media turned it into a sensation. Father versus son, a family fight like never before. But Ayatun didn't care about the headlines. He had stayed silent long enough. Now, his fists would speak. And Boma, still chasing attention, still blind to the damage he caused, had no idea that he had just stepped into a storm built from years of quiet pain. A storm that had waited a lifetime to be heard. The stadium was silent, the kind of silence that comes just before a storm. Ayatun stepped into the ring, not as a son, not as a fighter, but as a man carrying years of pain. Across from him stood Chief Boma, older, slower, and completely unprepared. He smiled like it was a game. He waved to the crowd, played to the cameras. But Ayatun didn't smile back. He didn't wave. His eyes were locked, cold and focused. This was not a match. This was a reckoning. The bell rang. From the first punch, it was clear, Ayatun didn't come to compete. He came to punish. Blow after blow, he hit with the weight of every scream he remembered. Every bruise on his mother's skin. Every tear they both had swallowed in silence. Boma tried to defend himself, but his hands were too slow, his body too weak. He wasn't fighting the boy he used to beat. He was facing the man that pain had built. The crowd, once cheering, grew quiet. They watched not a fight, but a breaking. Ayatun's fists were not just hurting Boma's body, they were destroying the power he once held. The lies. The cruelty. The fear. One final punch sent Boma crashing to his knees, gasping, broken, lost. Ayatun stood over him, breathing heavy, eyes steady. And then, he leaned in close and whispered, "Now you know how she felt." He didn't wait for applause. He didn't raise his hands. He just walked away, leaving behind a man, and the past, finally defeated.